Right folks, this is a lessons learned video on the Hexbeam that I recently built. I thought it was worth doing this video, so if you're actually considering building this antenna or you're already building it, and I know there's at least half a dozen of you because you've been in contact with me asking the odd question or just showing me your progress, and I think that's absolutely great that the others are actually building along. So I thought it was good to share my experiences. I'm going to break it down into all the different sections like the spreader arms, the wire sets, the center plate or the hub, etc, etc. Now, I guess the first thing to say is, do I actually regret building this Hexbeam? And categorically no. It's been a fantastic experience doing this. Would I do it again? Yes. Where I've actually ended up with the bill of materials and what it's actually cost, it's probably cost me 3 times that, probably 4 times that. But again, that's been spread over the last 15 months, so it's not felt quite as painful. But the end result is that I got a great deal of satisfaction, and I'm able to pass that on to you guys, and you're able to get the benefit of my experience and to have the confidence to build a Hexbeam and afford to build the Hexbeam. Now, I was having a look at part of my research, I've looked at all sorts of commercial Hexbeams. I've not captured them all because there's quite a few manufacturers, especially in the States. But certainly here in the UK, you're talking, for the cheapest Hexbeam, you're talking about 500 or 550, £550, something like that. For the portable version, for the heavier duty version, you're up around £700, maybe more actually if you get the storm supports. And even over in the States, there's a Hexbeam that goes up to about $1,800, but that's a serious heavy duty piece of kit. And there's really, that is your range. For a sort of standard Hexbeam, you're looking about £700, so that's what's that, $900. So I've done it for about £170-ish, give or take, depending on what you've got to hand and your postage and packaging costs. So I've got some rough notes here, and I'm just going to go through these, and I might think of some others as I go along. So I'll start with the center post, and that's the bit in the middle. Everything connects to your wires connect to there, your coax connects to there. So I opted for the simple coax fed, where we have coax jumpers, and I just went with the 5-band. I didn't go with 6 meters, but I can add it. For very little additional cost, probably literally less than £5, I could add 6 meters. But yeah, I went with the coax method, as specified by K4KIO Leo, and it's worked absolutely fine. My only slight gripe with this is it doesn't quite look professional enough for me, and I know that's quite OCD because it does look good. But I do have a new design, and I don't want to share that just yet because I've ordered some of the parts for that and they may not fit. So in fact, the main part of that's actually being delivered tomorrow, fingers crossed. And I'll know by tomorrow evening if that's going to work, but I will keep you updated on that. Because on this center post, you need to use the coax, which we've talked about. And the big thing is you need to seal that coax. Now, I've used something called liquid electrical tape, and it's absolutely awesome stuff. I used 3 coats on this in the coax to stop any water ingress, so it's unlike that's ever going to happen. But nevertheless, with this new method that I'm going to show you, and I've never seen anyone do it just quite like this. The post itself was 20 millimeters in diameter, and it was 2 millimeter wall thickness. I think maybe the next time I would go with a 25 millimeter post diameter, but I would shrink the wall thickness to maybe even 1 or 1.5 millimeters. And I've spoke about the new development that I'm working on, but as I say, I don't want to share that just yet. So the base plate or the center hub, it connects to the bottom of the center post. Yeah, I mean, it was really inspired by a lot of the other Hexbeams that are out there. It's got the RSB hydraulic clamps. These are very inexpensive, certainly here in the UK. About 50 or 60 pence here, so less than $1 for you guys in the States, but I know sometimes they're difficult to get a hold of. So the diameter of that was 200 millimeters. It was 3 millimeter thick, so 1/8 of an inch, and it's worked absolutely fine, no complaints. But I have going to change to a 150mm diameter base plate, and I'm going to try that, and I'm certainly going to do that for the new Hexbeam that I'm working on. And I'm only using one RSB hydraulic clamp instead of the two, because the spreaders are quite lightweight. They're quite easy to bend, because if you've got really strong, tight, tough spreaders, that's when you perhaps will bend that center, that plate with it only being 3mm thick. But you could thicken it up, so you could go 100. I've just got 150mm diameter plate, 3mm thick again, but I could have went thicker. But I think it'll be okay. There probably could be another option there, like I did with my moccasin for 20 meters. You could actually sandwich a couple of plates together. That actually works. But I think the single plate works absolutely fine. But not a lot to say about the base plate. No particular order here. So on the wires, that all worked out really quite well. So the wire I used here was 1mm stainless steel, and it's 49 strands, so 7 times 7 strands. And yeah, not a lot to say. Now, Leo gives some calculations on his website for using bare copper wire. So what you normally find is with stainless steel, it needs to be that little bit shorter. The velocity factor is obviously different, and I think the conductivity is a little bit different as well. Some say don't use stainless steel, but don't believe it. If you've got a use for it, use it. It works, and I don't think you're ever going to notice any difference on your S meter. But yeah, the wire worked really good. But from Leo's calculations, the wire was circa 2.1% shorter than the copper. All right, so I had to basically just make a set, and then I had to remake a set. Some of them I was able to shorten, but the lower bands, the higher bands, the shorter wires, I actually had to make new ones. So probably took me an extra couple of hours, but hey ho, that's fine. That was a learning curve for me, and I've given you the data. Consequently, the link to all the files, the bill of materials, is down in the description, and I've put web links to nearly everything. So even if it's not within your country, you can get it. Now, I've linked the folder itself, and it's easier for me to do that. So if I need to change files within that folder, it doesn't change the link, so you can put that in your favorites. All right. So yeah, the wires worked really well. Obviously, I didn't have to worry about sealing them because they're stainless steel. They're not going to rust. They're 316. So there's a little loop on the end of them where it connects to the center post, and all good. No complaints there. I would certainly use that method again, and that wire. Now, the bit that caused me the most grief, where I got scunnered, where I mentioned at the beginning, was the spreader arms. Now, initially I used 8mm fiberglass poles, and I'd used these on my 10-meter moccasin to great effect, but 10-meter moccasin is pretty small compared to a 20-meter hex beam. But there was me thinking, with all the rope supports, it would tension up quite well. It tensioned up fine, but it was incredibly floppy. That's the best way to describe it. And I'd really had my heart set. I designed the center plate with the RSB clamps, and I thought, oh no, I'm going to have to redesign the center plate using the bigger clamps, so the hole spacings were different. But I actually managed to drill out the RSB clamps on the base plate. So that's one thing that I had to do, because I've got a little bit of tubes of aluminium in there, so I'm able to just slot the spreaders into. So yeah, the 8mm didn't work. I could have went up a size to, I think it's 9 or 9.5, which I used on my 15-meter moccasin. But do you know what? After the experience with the 8, I just opted to go with the bigger one again, and I went with the 11mm poles. Now, they're quite thick-walled. You're not going to break these. No regrets at all for using these. And I think it's probably the most cost-effective way to actually build your hex beam. What don't I like about them? Well, they have a ferrule on the end of them. I don't think it's stainless. I think it's just like some sort of galvanized plated ferrule, where you can connect the poles together. But what you find is these poles are not a great fit. They're absolutely fine for the hex beam. It's more when you put them together, there's a little bit play in them, and there's absolutely nothing at all wrong with that. But again, my OCD didn't like that. The ferrules also, they are never fixed on that well. So when you first get your pole sets, you should take the pole and really try to pull that ferrule off the pole with all your strength. Wiggle it, try to pull it off. If you can't pull it off, it's good. Chances are it will pull off. And if it does, you need to clean up the end, clean up the ferrule, maybe rough it up with some sandpaper, put some super glue, and then stick it back on. Once it's stuck back on and dry, I then put a little bit of heat shrink over the top of that, just to give it that little bit extra strength. It all takes a little bit of time, but once you've done it, it's never going to go anywhere. You're not going to have to worry about it again. On the poles themselves, there is little plastic clips that hold the wire. Again, this was actually a bit of probably took me one of the longest times to research on what I was going to use for these wire clips, because it was portable and needed to take the wire out really easily. So I used these tent pole clips, and they work absolutely fine for portable. I probably wouldn't recommend these for long term, but for portable work, they're great, quite cheap. You can get them from Amazon or even cheaper from the likes of AliExpress. Now you need a way of an end stop for these, so to set them at your correct length, and then to stop it moving in order to roughly you don't put a lot of tension on your wire elements, but there needs to be some. So I've actually used glue lined heat shrink. I basically put them into place roughly, and I put a little section of glue lined heat shrink. But with doing that, it's fixed. I can't move them. So I've actually come up with another idea, and I've actually bought some stainless steel hose clips, but these are the spring ones. You see them on like lawnmowers and stuff, garden machinery for fuel pipe clamps. You just use a pair of pliers, and I can actually crush these with my hand to put them over the poles. So I'm going to use those for my next hex beam. You need to get them all exact length, so you need to average whatever you can. You should measure. So for each band, measure the distance from the center out, and then see what you've got for all 6, and then you need to average that, and then that will give you a nice even wire all the way around. But these little tent pole clamps that I'm going to use, I think they're going to work really, really well. On the poles themselves, the 11 meter poles is good, but it's quite a thick wall thickness. If I could get the same poles but with a thinner wall, but that is very, very difficult. We do have a company here in the UK, but in order to buy specials, you need to be spending a lot of money and buying like 500 meters of pull extruded fiberglass, which I'm never going to do. The support ropes, so you have 12 ropes in total. So you have 6 going from the center to the outside, and then you have 6 going around the circumference. I used 2mm Mastrant P, yep, because you get M and you get P. I actually prefer the P rated ones. It's a little bit thinner. It's not quite as strong for the size as the M, but it's not quite as flexible, and I like it for that reason. So, and I've been using Mastrant P for a long, long time. So that 2mm rope is excellent. I actually crimped it instead of actually tying a knot in it, which was a little bit neater, and then just used a lighter on the end just to stop the rope fraying anymore. So yeah, really, really pleased with that. I think it's got about a 90 kilo, so what's that, like 100 and 200 pound breaking strain. There's not going to be anything like that. So that was all good. But when I was setting up initially, I used a very cheap yellow, they called it paracord, but it wasn't. It's just rubbish. But for setting it up and getting your lengths, it's ideal. And talking of lengths, you need to make sure that everything is symmetrical on the hex beam. So your spreader arms need to be all exactly the same, or within maybe say 1/4 of an inch. The same with all your ropes. There's an S hook on each end, and one of them actually crimp it onto the end of the spreader arms, so that end's fixed, so that makes it a bit easier. So lengths all need to be almost identical, so that's something that to really watch. If you don't do that, and when you connect your last string up, because the hex beam will not tension until you get all the wires connected up. So you do the center wires, center or sort of or from outside to center, do those 6, which brings it up, and then you do the circumference, and it's the last one you connect on the circumference. That's what just locks it. All right. So that's why that's why the length is critical. And for deployment, I've been using some little Velcro straps just to wrap around it, because that's quicker. Because you want to fold up the ropes neatly, so when you undo it, just pull it apart and it just pulls straight out. If you don't, the last thing you want to do is be getting knots in the field. So I have some little Velcro cable tie things. They're meant for like cable tidies and stuff in offices, but they work really well for this, and they really weren't expensive. They're pennies each when you buy them in a pack. A spares kit. That's something that I still need to add. So I'm going to buy a storage bag, roughly 200mm in diameter, 1.2 meters long, and it's going to probably be like a light stand bag, something like that. I'll get something on Amazon quite cheap, just to put everything in. But for spares, I'll probably have a spare spreader arm. I may even bring some wire, although I don't see the wire breaking. A little kit, so I can basically make it up on the fly with a couple of tools, and wing nuts especially. So where you attach the elements to the center post, it's M6 wing nuts, and I can see them getting lost. So I'd bring some wing nuts, some plain washers, and some spring washers, just a couple, which will take up next to no space. Put them in a little box, and I think that's almost it. Behind me here, I actually have a box, and it's full, and I've deliberately kept it all together because I have loads of Hexbeam spares. So this is stuff that, going back to the beginning, where I probably spent 3 or 4 times what it really costs, or what it actually costs now, and that was all my R&D. So I've kept that as a reminder, and some of the parts there I might use again, and I've got some parts in there which I'm going to use for the future Hexbeam, and that's going to be a 15 meter through 6 meter. So if the 20 meter version is just a little bit unwieldy, and that's perfectly understandable, this one may be right up your alley. But I will remake a bill of materials and everything if you want to build that. Now, maybe the elephant in the room here is, how do you actually get this Hexbeam up into the air and to use it? Because I recommend, from my experience, you need to get that up about 25 feet to really make it sing. You can get them working lower. You know, we're at the height, we're at solar maxima just now, okay? So, you know, a lot of antennas are going to work, but to really make it sing, get it up at least 25 feet, preferably 30, 35, and that will make 20 meters really work well, and that will be a pilot buster, especially if you combine it with some power. So I use it's an 11 meter WIMO pole. It was originally branded by EA Antennas. I bought it from Martin Lynch and Sons, and they told me it was on back order about 6 weeks, and that was fine. And EA Antennas were actually taken over by WIMO, and that antenna still exists on the WIMO site, but it's a good bit more than when I bought it. I think I've bought it, and Martin Lynch have placed the order and went, oops, we need to put our prices up a bit. So that video, that post, or that mast, probably deserves a video on its own of actually how I use it, how I guy it, how I stop it from rotating, which is the critical part. And it's really quite simple. And when I want to rotate it, I just use the strong arm method, my hand, and all there is I need a ratchet with a 13mm socket on it. I just need to loosen it, tighten it, spin it, tighten it back up again. It's all pre-tensioned, all guyed up, and it works a treat. Maybe not if it's pouring a rain and you don't want to go out and adjust it, but it's much easier than actually buying a rotator, because remember, this Hexbeam is designed for field day operations, so it's not really meant for putting up and forgetting about for months or years on end. So I think that is just about covered it. If there's anything that you can add, please leave it down in the comments, but I hope this video has helped you, maybe inspired you to go out and build this Hexbeam, or build one, or even just building an antenna, because it's great to build your own. And I'm at a stage where I'm really loath to actually buy an antenna, because, you know, it's not being big-headed, but I can generally build an antenna better than what I can buy one from, because I'm not paying for someone else's labor. And that's, you know, people need to make money here, and you're paying for these people's time. And even if you're going to go and buy a Hexbeam at say £700 or £800, $1,000, I don't see that being terrible value. I still see it's been one of the best value HF beams about, because running a beam on 20 meters really makes a difference. So fair play to those guys. And from what I understand, you know, they're always sold out and there's always a waiting list, and that you know, that tells you a lot. All right, guys. Again, I'll say it again. I hope that's been of some use. And yeah, we'll catch you on the next one, hopefully with some more Hexbeam videos. Bye for now.